Hi, it's the Wild Witch here. Now, I've got my little notebook because I'm going to do some questions and answers, and this one is the goth tag. Let's get started. How long have you been goth? How long's a piece of string? I've always been interested in spooky stories. From being very young, I used to like to scare myself half to death when I was about 10. Around about this time, I was seeing people like Susie Sue on television programs like Top of the Pops when people were looking different. So for me, it's something, I wouldn't say I was born with it, I was born this way. I would say that it's something that's developed. And certainly in my teens, I was very interested in the Gothic subculture. I was a big fan of The Cure during the 1980s. I had quite a few of their stuff. In fact, at one point I had every single album by them. And even, bootlegs from gigs and so on that I collected. So I had a lot of Cure stuff. But I also liked lots of other music as well. I liked a lot of 1970s music because that was on the radio when I was growing up. And just lots of different things. So I've been goth for quite a while now. I haven't always dressed goth, but I've been, darkly inclined for a long time. How were you introduced to goth? Well, as I said, it's been kind of a process of osmosis, really. I've drawn from various sources what it could be to be goth, I suppose. And without kind of defining myself as a goth, but certainly sort of being quite gothic, whether it's through clothes that I've worn it or whatever. I didn't follow a friend who was into it. I kind of came to it through by myself, which is I think how a lot of people get into the subculture, is they come to it themselves. So I would say it's from 1980s certainly, when it was a very exciting time musically. There were lots of different kinds of music around. And that was what was good about the 80s. So I was introduced to it by music mainly. So through music and through reading magazines like Smash Hits, and then progressing on to the NME and Sounds, and seeing adverts for Phase clothing and thinking, I really like that shiny thing, or I really like those boots with all the buckles on them, and when I get older I'm going to get some because when I can afford to get some, and that sort of thing. But I always liked wearing sort of lots of black eyeliner and used to wear tassely hippie skirts and that sort of thing. So anyway, I was introduced to it a long time ago. What subgenre would you put yourself in? I don't like to be categorised particularly, which is why it's a bit strange to say that yes, I'm a goth, because I don't like labels. So subgenre wise, a bit of a romantic goth, a little bit of medievally goth, a little bit of jazz goth, just a little bit of goth really. I don't think it's something that can be categorised too much. I know that there are people out there who will say that they are in a particular, they're pastel goth or they're romantic goth and they are definitely this and they're definitely that. I think because it is a subculture that borrows from so many different sources, being in a subgenre is kind of very limiting. And I think one of the beauties of a lot of goth people is that they are not limiting themselves. They don't limit themselves to a subgenre. What do you believe to be the basis of the goth subculture? It kind of all goes back to round about the late 1970s, early 80s, where you have the post-punk movement. So you have bands like The Damned, who were a punk band. They were classified as a punk band, but were later kind of adopted by a lot of goths because they had a kind of this darkly vampiric kind of comic book-esque ness about them. Bands like the Sisters of Mercy that came out of Leeds, the Leeds scene, which was a bit more industrial and less cosmopolitan, say, than the stuff that was coming out of London around the same time, but again using electronica but presenting it in a way that was different to how things were being presented in London. When the north of England, and certainly during the 1980s, the late 70s, early 80s, the north of England was quite a I would say, dark place, because it had heavy industry, and unfortunately a lot of those industries were being taken apart and moved abroad and so on. There was a general despondency that was coming out of the north of England, and that is reflected culturally through the music, which is where perhaps the Gothic subculture comes from regarding that. So, yeah, I think that's the basis of the Gothic subculture. Although, obviously, things like literature and the darkly inclined literature of Edgar Allan Poe, Bram Stoker, Mary Shelley, etc., are things that have been added into it. As people have adopted the Gothic subculture, they've kind of become more involved in finding out about where it all stems from. So it stems from lots of places, and certainly, you know, lots of things have a goth title or Gothic title without necessarily being terribly Gothic, if you understand. What do you dislike about being goth? I think the only thing that I will really say about what I dislike about it is some of the elitism that happens. There are people who say, I'm more goth than you because I do this, or I wear that, or whatever. There is no more goth than anybody else. So you're either goth or you're not. I dislike how people make assumptions about you because you're into the Gothic subculture, that they presume that you dance naked around fires and that you're into animal sacrifice and that you're a Satanist and those kinds of things. That is basic ignorance. People are ignorant of what it means to be a goth. They think if you've got black spiky hair and you look like death warmed up, then you are some way lacking as a person. And I think that ignorance is awful. So that is more from the general population rather than from the Gothic subculture. I tend to find a lot of goths that I meet or speak to are generally a bit more intelligent than a lot of other people, and because they're into this idea of being themselves. But yeah, elitism is number one. Don't like it. Nuh-uh. Because it just reminds me of being bullied at school. Most insecure is the one who picks on other people because of their own insecurities. What do my parents think of it? Well, my parents are getting on a bit now. And I remember when I got dressed up one night to go out and I had a PVC miniskirt on, fishnets, thigh boots, some sort of underwear type thing with a lace shirt over the top tied up, and all my hair backcombed and crimped, and I looked fabulous. You know, I looked like Death from Sandman. I was quite proud of the fact that I'd done this look quite well. I was in my 20s by this time. I was in my early 20s and I did this. And my dad said to me, you're not going out like that. You look like a prostitute. My mum turning around and saying, actually, I think she looks quite nice. So, yay, mum, go mum. You know, my mum's always been one that I've been able to speak to about these things a bit more. She's quite set in her ways in a lot of respects, and she's mad as a box of frogs in a lot of other respects. But she's always been open-minded regarding the way that I look, which is nice. You know, I remember having a conversation with her in the early 90s about Axl Rose. She thought Axl Rose was quite good and liked the way that he was dressed differently to other people, and that she liked Toyah for the same reasons. You know, Toyah in her early career, her early musical career, you know, with her massive hair and exotic looking makeup. You know, she said she liked them because they were different, because they looked different. So yeah, I think there was kind of a relating thing that went on there. So yeah, generally speaking, they like me for who I am, so that's okay. Eyebrows or no eyebrows? Well, I'm an eyebrows person personally. I do understand why people shave them off and draw them on and draw, you know, fantastic shapes with them, etc. I'm an eyebrows on person for me personally. I have never shaved my eyebrows off. I've had them quite thin, a lot thinner than they are now, but I certainly wouldn't get rid of them. No, because they frame the face. But as I said, I understand why people do shave them off if they want a more exaggerated look. And there are some people out there who look fabulous with drawn on eyebrows. I won't say that they don't. But I always think people of my age and a bit older, if you can look like Crazy Cat Lady. So, eyebrows. Favourite band? Now, I keep changing my favourite band. There was a time when I was very, very into the Sisters of Mercy. I was very, very into The Cure. The moment I'm going through a Susie and the Banshees phase again, quite like that. I received a set of the first sort of 6 albums or so by Susie and the Banshees for Valentine's Day, and I've had it on in my car non-stop, so I'm going to be through a Susie and the Banshees phase. But yeah, there's other times when the Rosetta Stone were one of my favourite bands. Bauhaus have been in there sometimes, and I go through phases of what I like. Sometimes I'll be more into one thing than another, and sometimes I'll go into a metal phase again, and I'll start listening to a lot of heavy metal. Other times I start listening to 1970s and glam rock and that sort of thing. Lots of different ones, unfortunately. My opinion on Marilyn Manson. I'm going to be a bit contentious here because I quite like Marilyn Manson. I like the fact that he's intelligent and he's not afraid of being himself. You could say that he's kind of copied Alice Cooper, but with a little bit more swearing. Looking at it from that way, he's not been afraid to be himself, which is what I like about him, and he's not been afraid to explore and expand boundaries, which is he gets from people like David Bowie, who pushed the limits when they were younger. So I like that about him. I like the fact that he is unapologetic about who he is, that he was somebody who a lot of gothic people can relate to because he was bullied when he was a child, and he's sought to try and understand that, and he's done a lot of stuff for the younger people, and I applaud that. Yeah, okay, he's a Satanist. That's who he is, that's what he does, and that's fine by me. I quite like him. I know. I quite like some of his music as well, so I'm typically non-goth in that because he's a pop artist, he's a rock god. And he did a good version of Tainted Love. What were your Baby Bat days like? Baby Bats didn't exist when I was young. You were either a goth or you weren't. No, he's Marilyn Manson, and that's fine by me. We're no Baby Bats. Mm-mm. So my Baby Bat days were not Baby Bat days at all. They were proto-goth phase, they were teenager phase, they were just who I was. So that involved experimenting with makeup a lot, which I used to do. I used to like sitting in my bedroom painting on my makeup and trying out different kinds of makeup, which is kind of something I still like to do, which is why I buy so many different kind of makeup products. Tried to do things like backcombing my hair and everything, and I could never quite get it right. So I used to crimp my hair a lot. So my hair was always kind of a burgundy type colour, pretty much what it is on the ends here now. And I used to crimp it a lot. And I'd wear black and wear floor-length skirts and tassel-y skirts, Afghan skirts and so on. Doc Marten boots were never off my feet. We didn't have new rocks back then. And I couldn't afford pikes and couldn't get pikes because you had to go to a specialist shop to get them, or you had to send off for them. And I wasn't prepared to part with 25 quid back. It was a lot of money back in the 80s. I wasn't prepared to spend 25 quid on a pair of boots that might not fit properly because I would have to order them. I couldn't just go into a shop and try them on and buy them. That came in the 90s, where it became a bit more widespread, then I was able to buy them. But I still remember buying some mail order and speaking to them on the phone and saying, I'm a size 6, but, what can you recommend? And they said, try us the next size up because they're very, very pointed. So I remember doing that. But yeah, certainly it was a time of trying things out. I remember having a black satin shirt and a black tube skirt, wearing them a lot, a hell of a lot. Fashion in the sort of mid-80s for oversized shirts, and I had a few of these, and I had them for a decade. I had them for 10 years or more, and I was still wearing them in the 90s when the goth revival thing started happening in the 90s, and I was wearing them then as well. I used to buy them from the hippie shop, one of the hippie shops. So I would buy tassel-y skirts and oversized shirts and wear that sort of thing. Sometimes with a belt. I've still got a conch belt from the 80s, which I'm very proud to say I still have, because